Hello, my name is Kevin Snyder here for Tuts Plus. Let's jump right in and take a look at what we're going to be making today. Okay, so for this project we're going to start in After Effects and we're going to create a animated texture, and all we're going to really be interested in is the alpha channel. So this whole animation is based off the alpha channel that we create in After Effects. The paper and the lighting and the shadows, we're going to go ahead and add those in Cinema 4D. We're going to use the Mograph module to clone planes into Z-space here, and then we're going to offset that animation using some of the tools in Mograph. Okay, so this is a really fun project. It's the results are pretty nice to look at, so I'm excited to share this with you. Let's jump right into After Effects and get started. Let's start with New Comp, Control N. I'm going to name this Main Render. We have 1280 by 720, square pixels, 30 frames per second, and for a total length of 12 seconds. Okay. Let's go ahead and create a layer for the box, Control Y. I'm going to name this Box. This layer is going to be larger than our comp window, so 2000 by 1500. Okay. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if I rotate this layer, I always want the comp window to be covered up by our box layer. While we're in After Effects, lighting, colors, and textures are irrelevant. All we're interested in is getting out an image sequence with an alpha channel. Okay, so it's kind of nice here in After Effects. We don't have to pay a lot of attention to those other details. We can just get things animating, and then we'll worry about the lighting and texturing once we jump over into Cinema 4D. To start our animation, I want to start with a full sheet of paper like we have visible here, and then we'll have a box slowly open up to reveal our animation. So to do that, let's go ahead and apply a mask to this layer. So I'm going to double click the rectangle tool. We'll double click the mask and hold down Control Shift Alt so we can scale it from the center. Let's zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to turn on the guides so that we can kind of adjust the size of our box accordingly. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we want this to be the inside of the box, so I'm going to change the mode to subtract. And so all of our animation will take place here in the center of the box. We want this to scale up over time, so at 1 second, let's go ahead and click M to reveal the mask path, set a keyframe, go back here to 0, and on the mask I'm going to double click it, Control Shift Alt again, and we'll take it all the way down to nothing. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Okay, good. So in 1 second we'll just have this zoom out. Now this keyframe right here, let's go ahead and right click on it and do Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. Okay, and you can't see it. You can also hit F9, but my screen capture software won't let me use F9 to set that. Let's make this opening a little bit more interesting. Let's go ahead and have this layer rotate as it comes in. Now we're going to have a lot of elements rotating, and we want to be able to rotate them all together. So let's do that using a null layer. So go to Layer, New, Null Object, and let's name this Controller. And I'm going to parent my box layer to the controller. And I actually want to see those keyframes U. So if we look at the rotation here, I want to set a keyframe for rotation, and we'll go back to the beginning, and I'm going to set this for 180 degrees. So now my box will rotate in as it opens up. Okay. Now on rotation, let's give this a little bit more life, if we go to Effects and Presets, I have a preset in here from Gray Machine. I've used this quite a bit. Inertial bounce. You want to make sure that your property is selected, and then all we have to do is double click it. These numbers have turned red, letting you know that there's an expression. If I hit E twice, here's the expression. We have amplitude, frequency, and decay. You can change those values, okay, to kind of, control the animation, obviously. But I'll leave those at their standard values for right now. The nice thing about this is as this rotates in, it's going to overshoot a little bit and then bounce into position. So those little bit of animations and adding some dynamics like that really helps when we take it over to Cinema 4D to make it just look a little bit better. Okay, let's go ahead and add some text to our box here. And we'll get that into position. One thing that I like to do with this project is always make sure my elements are somehow connected to the inside of the box instead of having free floating objects in here. Obviously you don't have to adhere to that restriction. It's just a little bit of a restriction I put on myself, trying to make it seem kind of realistic. But that's kind of the mindset that I'm in when I'm designing this. Always trying to have elements connected to the inside of the box here. So with our text, let's go ahead and parent that to the controller so that it rotates around as well. Okay, and we want to add as many dynamics to our elements as possible. So let's go ahead and look at the scale. So maybe when it hits right here, I want this to be scaled up to 100%. And maybe right in here, let's have it be at 0. Okay. Good. Now with scale, let's go ahead and apply that bounce preset. Now I want these elements to come in at different times, so these letters to not scale up all at the same time. So let's do that using a script. So with my text selected, I'm going to go and run a script called Decompose Text. And we have a couple options here. We can do original position using expressions or approximate position without. I'm going to choose approximate position without just because I already have expressions applied to it. And if you have more text, you can obviously change how it's broken up. So I click Decompose, and now I have a layer for each letter. I'm going to delete my original, and I'm just going to come in here and kind of space things back out real quick. This project is very forgiving. If you make little mistakes here in After Effects, you don't really notice it too much over in Cinema. So this comes up and we have our letters coming in. Let's go ahead and offset those so that they are not coming in at the same time. I want to look at my keyframes. Okay, the A. Okay, good. Let's add another element. So once this text comes into position, I'm going to have a rectangle come through here. And I'm just going to make sure, well, let's do Control A, select everything, throw everything up. And without anything selected, we can choose the rectangle tool to make a shape layer. And I'm just going to draw a shape layer in here. Remember, color doesn't matter. So we want it to be approximately here. Let's go ahead and try that. Now, as we add things, I'm always going to parent those to the controller so that it rotates around as well. And let's go ahead and hit P for position, set a keyframe. And I want this to slide on, so I'm going to just scrub the values down here. Shape layer sometimes can be a little awkward. Okay, maybe a little faster, and let's have it happen a little bit down the timeline. So it comes in, and then as that comes in, let's go ahead and have this scene rotate again. So maybe right here, let's go down to the controller, hit U. I'm going to set a keyframe, and maybe here at 4 seconds, let's go ahead and have it go to negative 180. Okay, good. And as this rotates around, let's go ahead and scale down our original text. So that S for scale, let's set a keyframe. Let's come out here and go down to 0. I'm going to go ahead and click, well, let's not cut those off yet. I'm going to stagger these just a little bit so that they don't all scale down at the same rate. And I think is what I want to do too is select these keyframes. I'm holding down Shift. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do easy ease on those as well. And I think we need to do the same thing with the rotation here. So I'm doing easy ease. F9 is the shortcut. Okay, and maybe move it over just a little bit. So I'll try not to get too picky here, just so we get the idea of how to do this. As this rotates around, let's go ahead and add our next piece of text. So we have co. And again, we'll do similar things. So as you can see, I have everything connected to an edge here. Let's scale this up just a little bit. And we need to parent that to the controller. So as this rotates around and that other text comes out, let's go ahead and, well, when it gets right here, let's have it be at its full size. So S for scale, set a keyframe. Maybe I don't want it to scale up until that bar is connecting with all the letters. So set 0. And with scale selected, I'm going to go ahead and add my bounce preset. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and decompose that as well. So Files, Scripts, Decompose Text, and we'll do approximate again. And that one didn't really work out too well. Okay, so this will come around and it'll bounce in. And again, let's go ahead and offset our keyframes here. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and add a transition element. So let's make a new comp, Control N. I'm going to call this star. And actually it's not going to be a star, it's going to be a triangle, but we're going to use the star tool. 1280 by 720, 30 frames per second, 12 seconds. Okay. Let's go ahead and with the star tool selected, double click it. And if we look at the options for the polystar path, we want the number of points to be 3. And we're going to go without a fill, but we will have a stroke. And for the stroke, let's go ahead and increase the stroke width, something fairly large. And we just want to make sure that we can see the entire triangle here in our comp window. And let's go ahead and set a keyframe for the stroke width and come out here to 2 seconds. And we'll set it down to 0. So pretty simple. Okay, on the transform, let's go ahead and transform this scale over time. And I'm going to hit Y on the keyboard and drag our anchor point down just outside the comp window so that it scales from this point. And actually, let's go in here a little closer and let's move it right to the edge of our triangle here. And for scale, we want to set a keyframe and then come out here to the 2 second mark, and let's go ahead and scale this up. Let's go back here and let's actually scale this down. Let's start at 0. So as this scales up, and then it's going to fade away. Okay, so we have a little bit of an issue here. Let's go ahead and click on Y, and I guess I'm going to move the anchor point right to this point on the triangle. Let's see, there we go. So now it's scaling up the way I want. And let's just move it down a little bit. There we go. And we can play with this a little bit once we take it over. Okay, let's jump back over to our main render. And let's bring the triangle in. Let's select everything twirled up just so we have a little bit more space here. And my triangle, I actually want to move over here. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. And I want them to come in from the edge here. Let's see how we are on timing. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So this is going to come in. And it's going outside the edge right here. So let's turn on the continuous rasterize button, right? And it's going to let that animation play outside the layer. Okay, that looks good. Let's go ahead and duplicate this and take it to the other side, and we're going to rotate it. Okay, so I'm just kind of going for a little geometric pattern here. So as these two come in together, we'll have a nice shape here. Okay, looking good. Let's go ahead and take my text for the company. So the CO text, this one was before we decompose it. I'm going to delete that. The C and the O and the period and my line. Let me actually move this down here. All these layers here, we're going to go ahead and pre-compose those so that we can treat them as one element. Control Shift C. And let's just call this co period. Okay. And we gotta make sure that this is still parented to the controller here. Okay, good. So one thing that we're going to do here is we want these triangles to actually wipe this text and that bar off. So let's do that using a mask. Let's go ahead and select the pen tool, and on our CO layer here for the text, we're going to scrub right to where the layers start to interact here. And I think I'm going to create 2 masks. So let's go ahead and change this to subtract. And let's create another mask for this triangle. And if we hit M, we want to go ahead and set a keyframe for both masks. And we're just going to go through here. Since these are grown in scale linearly, let's see if we can kind of cheat. Maybe let's go ahead and get here and see if we can set a keyframe for these and see if they'll line up. So with mask, the fewer the keyframes, the better. And on this mask, we need to change this to subtract. Okay, let me just scrub this. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So let's just come out here to where the triangles are almost gone. And let's see if we can get these points to line up here. Let's scrub through. Okay, and that looks great. Let's go ahead and create one more graphical element right in here. And to do that, we're going to create a new comp. I'm just going to call this circle. Say OK. And again, with our ellipse tool, let's start right here in the center. And I'm going to do Shift Control Alt, so we kind of scale up from the center here. And for this one, I'm going to get rid of the stroke. Let's go ahead and fill it. So let's have this scale up maybe in 2 seconds. We'll have to check the timing here. So with scale, let's go to 100%. And at time 0, let's go ahead and make this 0. And after this thing scales up, I also want to give it a little transition too, once it gets large enough so that these edges on the top and bottom are touching the edge of the box. So let's do that with, let's go down to transitions, and I want to use CC Light Sweep. Now by default, if we come through here, this isn't really what I want, okay, because we don't want this light in here. We want our alpha channel just to be nice and clean. So I'm going to actually change this to, let's see what doors looks like. That looks pretty good. So we can wipe it from the center out. Okay, and the intensity, let's go ahead and turn that all the way down. And so now we just get a nice transition where this is going to transition wiping from the center towards the top and bottom. So I like that. Okay, so maybe once we get all the way out to our full size, let's go ahead and set a keyframe for completion, and maybe have that take, I don't know, let's go just to 3 seconds. and then we'll wipe it out. Okay, just like that. So we have to kind of visualize what this is going to look like once we get those stacks of paper in there. And so I think this will probably look pretty cool. Let's go back to the main render, and let's give us a little room here. Let's bring our circle in, and I want this circle to come in so that it's touching these edges here of the triangle, so that we have our connections to the inside of the box. And let's just check the timing here. So I need this to actually scale up a little bit faster. And actually, okay, so I like the timing there. I want it to be at its full size, probably right there. So I'm going to double click circle, and let's click U to see all of our keyframes, and I'm going to move those over. Let's jump back over to main render. So now as this comes in, that's looking pretty good. Let's see how we are on spacing. And I think is what we'll do is actually have that transition start while it's still scaling up. Yeah. Okay, that looks good. And while these triangles come in, so one thing we need to make sure we do, we have these parented to our controller. And while they're coming in, let's go ahead and give this another spin. So let's look at rotation, set a keyframe, and by the time it gets to maybe here, let's have it make a full rotation. Okay, so it's going to come around just like that. Okay, looking good. Let's add another text element here. So Control N for a new comp, and I'm going to call this presents. Okay. And so I'm just going to kind of keep things simple so that we can move on to the next step here. I'm just going to put some text in here, and change this back to just a simple font. It's actually and I'm going to make this bold. So I'm going to add a rectangle in here. And let's put present on top of our shape layer. F4 so I can add a track matte in here. And let's do alpha. And actually we want alpha inverted. And with our font here, let's actually go to black. I want it nice and bold and maybe a little bit larger. And make my shape layer just a little bit smaller. Okay, looks good. So remember, as we're working on this, we're really looking at where is this alpha channel at. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're working through here. Let's go back to main render. Let's bring in presents, and we're going to scale this down just a little bit. So as we come around, I think this would look pretty good if we had it just slide in where this circle is opening up. So let's come out here where our rotation is done bouncing, and let's parent this to our controller layer. And maybe, actually want to, let's try something else just for fun. Right here, I'm going to hit the asterisk key to set a keyframe, and I'm going to move over just about a second, and for the scale here I'm going to set a keyframe, and I'm going to unlink the X and Y. Let's go back to our marker, and I'm going to change the scale just on the Y, but I think is what I want to do is let's change the anchor point. Let's get in here, make sure this anchor point is right on the edge. Okay, so the keyboard shortcut is Y to go to the pan behind tool to move that. And so now if we change this to 0, we'll get kind of a reveal going on here. So let's jump back over to main render. So as this comes around, we have it being revealed, and we could probably have that happen a little bit sooner in time. Okay, on my circle 2, I think I want it scaling up just a little bit sooner. Okay, looks good. So let's go ahead and have this hang out here just for a second or so. And then just for time's sake here for the tutorial, I'm going to keyframe the position, and we can actually come in here, and I'm just going to move it up out of the way. Okay, and we'll bring in our next element, and actually let's do this. Let's have this layer go down out of the scene, because we'll put another rotation in here. So let's create our final text. So another new comp, Control N. Let's just call this paper box. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and put in our text here. I'm going to do all caps here. Let's put in a line underneath this. So I'm trying to just keep everything connected to that outside edge. So I have that one, and let me just hit Control D to duplicate this shape layer, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and we'll make it a little shorter. Okay, that looks good. And I think is what we'll do is on this vertical line here, let's go and hit Y and change the rotation point so it's down here. And I'm going to parent these two layers to this vertical rectangle here. So now if I rotate this one, everything else comes with it. So let's actually go ahead and do that. So I want to set the rotation down to just so it's out of the frame, set a keyframe. Let's come out here to 1 second, and let's rotate it into place. And I want it to bounce in there, so again, I'm going to use my, or not mine, but Gray Machine's inertial bounce. Double click it. So now it comes into place and it's going to bounce for us. Okay, Looking good. So let's jump back over to main render, and let's bring in our paper box animation, and let me turn that off for just a second. So as this comes out of place, I want this whole thing to actually rotate. So let's go back down to our controller, set a keyframe for rotation, and maybe right there, let's have this go to 180 degrees. And now I'm going to parent my paper box to the controller. Let's turn it on so we can play at the timing. And we actually want to scale this down just a little bit. Okay, and let's go back to paper box here. On our text, let's go ahead and scale that down a bit. And this shape layer here, let's scale it down just along the x-axis. Let's jump back to main render. Okay, good. At this point, once we're happy with our animation, we can go ahead and export this as a TIFF sequence with an alpha channel so that we can bring it into Cinema 4D, add our texture, add our lights, and add those dynamics to make this project so much fun. So I'm going to go up here to File, and I'm going to go Export, Add to Render Queue. So into the render queue for the output module, I'm just going to select TIFF sequence with alpha. Okay, and it's already going to put it in a folder. It's going to put all the TIFF sequences in a folder for me. I'm on After Effects CC, and so that's nice, but let's go ahead and give it a home. Click Save, and let's go ahead and render this out. We'll take it over into Cinema 4D in just a moment. Here in Cinema 4D, let's go ahead and take the work that we did in After Effects and really bring it to life. To set up this project, I'm running 30 frames per second. If we go into the render settings, I have it at 1280 by 720, and we're doing 30 frames per second and 360 frames for the 12 seconds of animation that we did in After Effects. Let's start off with a plane. Orient it towards the negative Z direction. I'm going to change the width segments to 1 and the height segments to 1. Width, we're going to do 1280. Height, 720. So we're doing that to match the frames that we created in After Effects. With the plane selected, go to Mograph, hold down Alt, and select Cloner. And under Object here, let's change the Y value to 0, the Z value to 40, and the count, let's go ahead and change this to 20. Under Transform, let's change the color to black. And what's going to drive this animation is changing these planes from pure black to pure white. Okay, and we want it to happen so that this first plane turns white before the one in the back does. Okay, so that the time is offset the further in Z space it is. And we're going to do that using, on our texture, we're going to use a shader. We're going to use the Mograph shader. When I first started to play with this idea, I thought about using the shader effector. And if we go to parameter, turn off the scale, go to fall off, and change this to linear, and really increase the Z value here, the Z scale, you can see that it does pretty much what we want. I want this first plane to turn white before the one in the back, and that's going to drive which frame is being displayed from After Effects. The only problem with the shader effector is I played with a lot of parameters, a lot of different things to get it animated right, and I never could really get it to look exactly how I wanted to. So the shader effector is not really the tool for the job here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. The effector that we're going to use is one that I don't use a ton, okay, but Mograph, effector, and formula. And again, under parameter, we want to turn off position, turn off scale, and we want color mode to be on. And let's do use alpha strength. So as we scrub through here, we can see that the formula is affecting our layers and not how we want it all. We want this to start turning white in the front and then be staggered as we go back. So under effector here, we're going to put in a new formula. Okay, I had a little help with this. The Cinema 4D community is great, so really appreciate how helpful people are. So we have clamp 0 semicolon 1. So this is saying that we're going to start from pure black going to pure white, and then semicolon T for a certain amount of time minus ID. Okay, so where it is in Z space, and then divided by F, and then close parentheses. Now with this, the F, if we look at our variables here, F in this stands for frequency, but it's not really, we could put in a number there, but I just like using the variable F because then we already have a slider here ready to go. Okay, so that makes it pretty nice. Now before we start adjusting these, it's hard to really see what's happening. We can't adjust how much time it takes, right, for this to turn white. So if I start here and if I get all the way to the end of my animation, I want to make sure that it is pure white just at the end. And it's hard to tell exactly when it's pure white, so it'll help once our texture's in there. And let's actually change this to 360 to compensate for all the frames we're going to render, right? Because at the end, that's when we want this to be pure white. The frequency here, this value, is going to help determine how much overlap there is. So let me turn down, let's get in here. I'll turn this down. If I crank this up, we can see that we start getting more overlap. Okay. And it'll be more evident once we get started, or once we texture this, exactly what that's doing. But by increasing this value, we're letting that animation play over more layers here. If we go really low, the animation is only going to play on this first plane, and then the rest of them are just going to look like sheets of paper. Okay, so feel free to crank this up really high, even though the default value only goes to 1. As you can see in the next step, we're gonna get this thing pretty high. So let's go ahead and actually create our texture so we can see what we're doing. So I'm going to double click over here, and I'm going to turn off specular. And for the alpha channel, let's go ahead and let me move this up so we can see it. I'm going to go down to Mograph, and we want the multi-shader. So let's click here, and we're going to add layers from a folder. So all I have to do is find the folder that we rendered out to from After Effects. Right there, we say OK. It says, do we want to create copies? Nope. And you got to give it a little bit because it's going to create a layer for each frame that we rendered out, so 360 of them. So it can take a little bit of time, but not too bad. There we go. Okay, and sometimes when you try and scrub here, there's a little bit of a delay, but as you can see, we have 360 textures located here, one layer for each frame. And for the color, let's go ahead and add a paper texture. And so I'll just go in here where I have some textures, and I'm just going to use these Video Copilot textures. Now, one thing that I've found with this is if you use a texture like this that has these dots in it, sometimes it's kind of distracting because you'll see that dot on every single piece going off into Z space, and it can be a little distracting. I like using some of this paper that's a little bit more plain. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this. And this is from Video Copilot. This is free from a site. We'll give a link there to be able to access those. So let's say open, no. And so now we have this paper texture. We can close this. Let's go ahead and apply this onto our cloner. Let's add a new camera. Oop. And actually I'm going to delete that camera. Let's get this into place here. So I'm going to come out here into the front, kind of center this up best I can. Now we'll add a camera. Let's go ahead and turn that on. Let's look at the coordinates really quick. So I'm just going to come in here and zero these out so it's kind of centered, and I'm going to zero out the rotations. Okay, let's right click it and let's add a protection tag to this so I can't bump it. And now if we go back to our formula, and if I scrub through here, we can start to see some motion, and it's kind of hard to see in here. Let's actually do one more thing that makes it a little bit easier to see, because we can see our texture is working here, but it's still a little bit hard to see. Let's add a new light, and so we can see that we're at the end of our animation here. On the light, let's go to General. The type, let's go ahead and change to Area, and we'll just bring it out here a little bit. I'm going to actually keep it a little bit close right now because it makes it easier to see what's going on instead of having this light reflect off the front of the box. So let's go back to our camera, and let's go to our formula, and we want to adjust our parameters now to get this animation looking how we want. And if I slide this, you can see that I'm moving through our animation. Okay, the problem is this frequency is way too low. Okay, playing with this, and for about this duration, I know that we need something more around 400. Okay, so like I said, it's very high, but if I scrub through here now, we can kind of start to see our animation reveal. Now it stopped right here at about 150. We want it to go all the way out here to 360. So this needs to be way smaller, maybe not that small. Let's go ahead and with the CTI here at the end, let's go ahead and scrub this up, increase the value until our paper box stops animating. So this part's just a little bit tricky. Okay, looks like right there. So now if I scrub through here, and that actually, this front part is done animating, but the back part is finishing up. I want this whole thing to be animating when it stops. I don't want to have the front part stopped. So I'm going to actually go down just a little bit. Yeah, we should have probably, I'll show you a trick that we can kind of combat this on. We should have left a little bit of our animation, kind of got cut off a little short there, but it's alright. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. If I scrub through here, Pretty fun. Now let me show you what this value right here does. This might help you out a little more, showing you what we got going on. So if I change this to like 200, and actually let's just go down to like 50, you can see that we don't have very much overlap here. So only a few layers here show our company name, and this other part is still on a different part of the animation. So it's really tough because the slider just doesn't change a whole lot. So we want these to overlap more. And so as you can see, as I increase this value, more of the layers behind are catching up to this front one. Okay, and so you can definitely play with this and see what you like. Maybe you want a little bit less overlap, and so with the lower value, now this backside is still in a rotation. Okay, so you can see we have quite a bit of staggering going on in the animation, and that can be a cool look too. Okay, so that looks pretty good as well. Let's change this to maybe 300 and take a look at how this looks. Okay, I'm liking that. Let's do a quick render here. So with our light, let's go ahead and bring our light out now just a little bit. And we actually need to add a shadow here, because without a shadow we lose a lot. I'm going to go to area. Let's render this again. Okay, one thing that I noticed in our animation here is I can see outside the paper here, right? Because the inside box here that we created in After Effects was a little bit too big. So a way that we can get around that is in After Effects, make this box smaller, okay? Or just make a larger comp so that we can't see the edge. Not the end of the world. Still looks really good, but just keep that in mind. Let's do a little preview here. That if you make this inside box just a little bit smaller, we won't see through to on the corners of these sheets of paper here. Now, one other thing that you might run into is if you have a lot of layers here, is you may not get all the elements rendered. For example, if I go to the cloner and let's crank this up, so we can see we have a lot of layers in here. It goes all the way back to here, but they're not getting rendered, right? And that's because we're using layers with alpha channels. And if we go into the settings, if we go to options, you may have to increase your ray depth. Okay, so if I change this, let me just go to 50. And also, if you notice that your shadows aren't being applied on all the layers, it's because this value is too low as well. So let me go to 50 and hit Control R. And now you can see all your layers are being rendered. Okay, so just be aware that that problem can occur. But this project's looking pretty good. I really like that you can start with a fairly simple animation After Effects, bring it over here into Cinema, and makes it really look pretty cool. Okay, one other thing I want to show you, let me go back here and change this down just a little bit. One thing I want to show you is, so we added these rotations in After Effects, but we can also apply some animations that are similar to this in Cinema 4D. If we want to just do it all in Cinema 4D, we actually can. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So with our cloner selected, let's go to Mograph, Effector, and let's go with the Step Effector. Now the parameter is on scale. I don't want that. Maybe rotation, so we can rotate it, okay? And we can do some fun things with rotation. So let me just kind of tweak these a little bit. So with the step effector applied now, if I turn it off, you can see what we started with. Turn it back on. Let's do a quick preview. And so we can add a little bit more dynamic to this. Okay, that's looking good. Now the other thing we can do too is we can animate this through our scene. So if we take the step effector, go to fall off, and change the shape to linear. And let's go ahead and turn up this value for the size in the Z direction. And we can animate this through our scene. Okay. And let's maybe turn up the fall off. So a thing that we can do here, let's say that we want to set it right here. And so for coordinates, I'm going to set a keyframe along the Z axis. And then let's just come out here a little bit and we'll move it through the scene. Hold down Control, set a keyframe. So as we move through, it looks pretty good. The other thing that we want to do though is be able to animate that off. I don't want it to stay like that. So we can also maybe just come forward a few frames, go to Effector, on Strength, I'm going to hold down Control and set a keyframe for Strength. And then when we get out here all the way through, I want this to come back. Okay, so it's going to animate through and then go ahead and ripple back through. Okay, one error that I found in this animation is if we scrub through here and we see the company name come right here where the box finally makes it all the way around, we're at 107 frames. Okay, and if we look on After Effects right here, we should be closer to 36 frames. Okay, where this box rotates all the way around. So to fix that, I made one little mistake. So under Formula here, and if we go to Parameter, on Color Mode, we want to make sure that Use Alpha Strength is not checked. Okay, so now if we come in here, where this box comes around, right there, it's a lot closer. Okay, so this animation is looking much better now because if we click this, if we watch the animation here at the beginning, it's not very smooth at all. Okay, it looks like the frame rate is too slow, and it's because it's just not showing enough frames here at the beginning, and then it kind of speeds up. So if we uncheck that and go back to the beginning, now watch, much smoother. Okay, then that's nice. Now one thing that I mentioned earlier is in this animation how this box is cutting through our planes and we can see through it. In After Effects, when this rotates, the inside of the box goes outside the comp window. So we want to make sure that, well, you don't have to, but you could fix that by avoiding that problem happening. One thing you could do on these rotations, so as this goes to rotate around on that controller layer, you could change the scale of this, right? So let me do Shift R to show rotation, and if we set a keyframe right here for scale and we come back here for scale and set a keyframe, and then in the center, or actually right where it's at its largest, if we just decrease the size here, so we actually need to do it right there. Okay, so we can rotate and back. Now obviously with our background layer here, our box, we would have to fix that, okay, because it has to be larger. So it's going to mess everything up if I scaled up now. One thing I could do now is create a new layer and call this box background. So this is going to be kind of a little quick fix here. Let me get to where this is straight on. And I'm going to just scale this up very large. Okay, I'm going to parent this to the controller, and I'm just going to add in a mask here really quickly. Let's scale it down. So all I'm trying to do is cover up that background. So let's go back to the controller. Let's look at where we had our keyframes. Oh, and on this box background, we need to set this to subtract. So now we have everything hidden well, and so with the scale here, we could actually bring this down just a little bit. It still needs to be scaled down more. There we go. All right, so a little bit of a band-aid here at the end, but by adding that box background and having it huge, we can scale this down during the rotations so that the inside of the box never cuts through our comp window. Okay, and by doing that, we're going to, in Cinema 4D, be able to get rid of these areas where we can see all the way through it. Okay, so I thought I was done with the tutorial, but I discovered one little thing that I'd like to pass on. You know, earlier in the tutorial I said here in Cinema 4D that the shader effector didn't work very well, it didn't give me the results I wanted, and I started wondering if I made the same mistake that I did with the formula effector by having this use alpha strength checked. And it turns out that that does have a big impact on some of the problems I was having. So let me just show it to you really quick in case you want to use the shader effector instead. Some people may be more comfortable with that instead of using the formula effector. So I'm going to delete the formula effector. I'm going to delete the step effector just to simplify things. And with the cloner selected, let's go to Mograph and effector, shader, parameter, let's turn off the scale. And here's the problem is by default use alpha strength is already on, and so we want to make sure we uncheck that. And if we go to fall off, we want to change this to linear. Okay, and let's change the scale along the z-axis. Let's make this nice and large. Now the larger it is, the more overlap we're going to have. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. So if we decrease in size, let me hold down shift so we can see we have quite a range of our animation being shown on the different layers, okay, because it's fairly small. So I'm going to hold down shift and scrub this up, and we can start to see that we're getting our animation kind of getting a little tighter in here, and we can see it. Well, we can't see it right now, so if we scrub the timeline in this case, nothing happens, right? We don't see anything. We have to actually animate this layer. So let me hit F5 and zoom out here. And with the shader, now if we slide this layer in the Z direction, we can get our animation to go here. Okay. So right here, let me just show you again. If we have a really small value, it's going to show quite a wide range of our animation, and we can even go smaller to really exaggerate this. Okay, that might be a look that you're going for, but I found that, you know, these larger values, I don't want it spread out so much. I want to tighten it up just a little bit. So I'm going to make this larger. Now all we have to do is animate this through, and if we come in here, we just want to get this part of our shader all the way back here at the face of our front layer. So I'm going to pull this back right here. I'm going to set a keyframe at time 0. And then come out here to 360 and push it forward until our animation stops. And we're still going. And I didn't mean to change the X value here. Let's change that back to 0. So let's keep going. Let's take a look here on the shader. So the animation is going to stop right here at the center because our fall off is at 50%. Okay, so if we take a look at the indicator here for the x-axis and the animation over here, we can see that when this indicator for the x-axis gets to the end, our animation has stopped. Okay, so you can kind of pick when you want it to stop. So let's just go back to the end here of our layers, hit a keyframe there. Now, one thing about keyframing to position is if we go and look at the timeline, so let me reposition this. That didn't work out real well. So one thing about keyframing it is by default, for most people, the keyframes are set to soft. So you can see that it eases out and then eases in, but we don't want that to happen. Otherwise, the animation is going to start off slow, and then it's going to speed up, and then it's going to slow down. Okay, so if we select, and then actually just Control A to select both keyframes, and let's change the interpretation mode to linear. So now when this thing plays, hit F1, it's going to play nice and smooth all the way through. Okay, and so I'm kind of happy that I discovered this. Always trying to learn new things, and just that one checkbox was throwing me off. A little bit frustrated that it took me a little bit to figure that out, but at least we got it figured out. One thing that I like about using the shader effector is that it gives us a little flexibility in how this animates. Right now our animation is going from the front to the back layer, right? So our motion, our time is marching forward from this very first clone, and then everything behind it follows. Well, using the shader effector, we can actually switch that. We can have the animation go from the back to the front. Okay, so if we hit F5, and for the shader, I'm going to go to Z position, and I'm actually going to go to animation and delete track just to delete our keyframes. And with the shader, let's go ahead and rotate this 180 degrees. And now, let's see. If we animate this from the back forward, let's get this so, and I'm going to start this so that the edge of our shader is right up here at the front, because the animation is going to start on these back layers and work forward, but we're not going to actually be able to see anything until this starts to open up in the front to reveal it. So let me bring this forward. Let's set a keyframe. And let's go ahead and animate this forward. And let's come here and take a look. Okay, so now if we take a look here, and we need to do the same thing as we did before. Oh, did I not set? Oh, we're zoomed in here. So one problem, I made a mistake. We need to go to the end. Sorry about that. Instead of keyframe, let's go to the beginning. This is kind of tight in here. Okay. So now, if we scrub through here, we have these layers animating from the back and working their way forward. And so not a whole lot different. Obviously, we still have the same basic animation, but it gives us just a little bit different look. It's kind of cool with it coming from the back towards the front. And of course, we don't want to forget, now that my keyframes are in the right position, that we'll do Control A, select them all, make them linear, and there we go. Okay, so either way, you can use obviously the shader effector and also the formula effector. Like I said, one nice thing about the shader effector, you can switch. Do you want the animation to start from the back layer and work its way forward, or from the front layer all the way back? So I'll include this project file in with the other one as well, so you can play around with using the formula effector or the shader effector. And now we are finally done. Thanks for watching.